Hey, what's up? This is Harry Wagner from Harry's Situations, and today I want to talk to you about my 2006 Toyota Tundra double cab. Now, first-gen Tundras are pretty hot right now, so if you own one, we're going to talk a lot about modifications for them. If you're interested in them, we're going to talk a lot about the different features that they have. But even if you don't own a Toyota Tundra, even if you'll never own a Toyota Tundra, we're going to talk about truck stuff. So that means suspension modifications, tires and wheels, lighting, gearing, and all of the little details that you can apply to your own vehicle. So stay with us. So to roll things back a little bit, Toyota introduced a truck to the market in the 70s. The first Toyota four-wheel drive pickup was introduced in 1979. That was a mini truck. We saw the introduction of the Tacoma in the mid-90s. And then the T100 was sort of Toyota's first foray into the full-size truck market. But American consumers laughed at it. It came with a 3.4 liter V6. It didn't have a V8, it wasn't that big, and people weren't interested. So now we have the first generation Toyota Tundra introduced in 2000. That had a V8 engine, it was a bigger truck, but still the American market said, not enough. Fast forward to 2007, Toyota introduces the second generation Tundra. It has a huge engine, a huge differential in the back, 10.5-inch ring gear, like a 14 bolt. It's a huge truck. The knobs are so big you could have catcher's mitts on your hands and still turn on the fan inside. But guess what? American consumers loved it. That's what they wanted, and they bought the crap out of them. Now, the first gen was more of a slow burn. These have become really popular in recent years, and the reason is that small size. So what was originally a detriment, now people like, myself included. I own a Dodge Ram diesel truck. My wife has a Dodge Ram diesel truck. They are great for towing. They are not great for daily driving. They are not great for parking in town. This truck is pretty comparable in size to a modern Tacoma, but it has a V8 engine under the hood. And not any V8 engine, but Toyota's 2UZ, the 4.7 liter V8. I love these engines. They're super smooth, they make great power. Honestly, I wish my Jeep Wrangler had a 2UZ in it. I think it would be a much more enjoyable vehicle than it is right now with the 4 liter. I know Jeep guys are firing up the keyboard there and getting angry, but I said what I said. So to back up a little bit, before I owned this 2006 Toyota Tundra double cab, I had a 2002 Access cab. And I love that truck, to be quite honest with you. It was great. I drove the crap out of it. I put a ton of miles on it. Originally, I just bought it for a shop truck. Then I put good suspension on it. I drove it down to Baja. I supported the Rebel Rally in it, and it was a lot of fun. When my family got a little bigger, I needed a double cab truck with full-size back doors, so I sold that truck and I bought this one. Now what I didn't realize is there's a lot of differences between these trucks. This 2006 double cab actually has more in common with a Toyota Sequoia than it did with that Access cab. So this is actually a physically bigger truck. It's 3 inches wider. The interior is totally different. And I'll be honest, I like the Access cab more than the double cab with regards to things like the interior and just the physical dimensions of the truck. One of the biggest differences between the Access cab and the double cab Tundra is the bed depth. So I didn't anticipate that, but this bed is actually over 3 inches deeper. Now that's a bit of a trade-off. I really liked with the Access cab being on 33-inch tall tires, it was really easy to reach over the side, get in the bed, get things in and out. This truck, having the deeper bed and being on 35-inch tall tires, not nearly as easy to get things in and out over the side. But the trade-off there is that you can fit an action packer under here and still have the tonneau cover closed. That wasn't the case with the Access cab. I can even fit an ARB Elements fridge in here. I mounted a fridge slide, and this still fits under the tonneau cover, which is great when you're out on the trail. Another thing that I did on both trucks is at the front of the bed, I've just got a ratchet strap holding a single Rotopax and a set of Max Tracks. I've also got a bag that's got a demo shovel in it and some bubble rope recovery gear like a kinetic strap and soft shackles. So this hardly takes up any room in the bed of the truck, but I've got everything I need for pretty much any situation I encounter. So I'm a bit of an overlander. I've still got my Rotopax, I've still got my traction boards. I'm just not displaying them on the side of a bed rack. There were a lot of things I liked about my access cab that I've duplicated on my double cab. Those include things like the Baja Designs front light bar, onboard air under the hood, the backflip tonneau cover, and inside I've got WeatherTech floor mats and a Takancha brake controller. All of those things I had on my last truck, and I liked them so much I put them on this truck. Now there are other things that I didn't have on that truck that I liked and I didn't put on this truck. Those include things like heavy steel bumpers, a winch. This is my daily driver. It doesn't need to have a winch on it. It doesn't need a bunch of extra weight with aftermarket bumpers. I wanted to keep it sort of discreet, and I wanted to keep it lighter and less expensive. So under the hood here, we've got this 4.7 liter V8 engine, but there's actually still quite a bit of space. I've mentioned that we had to change the master cylinder and the brake booster. These are Sequoia parts now that are designed to work with the rear discs instead of the factory Tundra components. I thought that was going to be an easy swap. Unfortunately, it was a lot more work than I was anticipating. Don't recommend doing that again. Another upgrade I made is this anti-gravity lithium battery. I've been running this for over 2 years now in all sorts of weather and conditions, and no complaints about it. Nearly everything we do when we modify our vehicles adds weight to it, but this battery only weighs 17 pounds compared to 50 pounds for like a stock battery, and it's way out in the front of the vehicle, over the fender, so adding lightness is something that's difficult to do. This was not an inexpensive upgrade, but I have no regrets about adding this battery. Moving across to the other side of the engine bay, you can see here we've got an ARB twin air compressor. Nate's Precision mounted this up for me. They've done the install in my Ram, in my wife's Ram. They always do a super clean install, minimalist. They know what I like, which is not a bunch of switches and dials on the dash, not a bunch of holes you have to drill in the dash. So this is all fully contained under the hood. You add your air line right here, and then there's just a little switch. I don't have an air locker in this truck, but I do use this to air up my tires when I'm done going off-road and I'm back on the pavement, and it's out of the way. It works super fast, and I couldn't be happier with the install. Definitely recommend this upgrade. Now that said, there were some things with my last truck that I didn't love that I wanted to improve upon. Those include the suspension and the brakes for the most part. So this truck has power stop brakes on it. These are Dakar race level parts, huge rotors, huge calipers, 6 piston calipers, and then in the back we installed a Sequoia axle that comes from the factory with discs instead of drums, and the load sensing proportioning valve in the truck was replaced with an adjustable Willwood proportioning valve. I'll be honest, that is not a modification I would do again. It was a ton of work. We had to change the master cylinder, the brake booster, a bunch of brake lines. I still don't have a functioning parking brake. I'm considering adding a line lock. Comment below and let me know if you use a line lock for your emergency or parking brake, or what I can do in order to hook up this Tundra parking brake cable to the Sequoia rear end, because currently it doesn't have one, and the parking pawl is not happy when I'm parked on slope. Now the braking is way better. I think if I wanted to do it on a budget, I would probably run 5th gen 4Runner rotors, which are not as big as these power stop rotors, and the calipers aren't as big, but they are bigger than the factory rotors. It's a pretty easy install, probably better bang for the buck. That's one thing I really liked about my access cab. I felt like great bang for the buck. This truck I've spent more money on, and even if you spend twice as much, it doesn't work twice as good, is what I've learned. So learn from my mistakes. There's some things I would do on this, and there's other things I would not do. On the braking upgrades, I would just do the Willwood proportioning valve in the back. I would add 5th gen 4Runner brakes up front and call it a day. Now that brings us to suspension. On my last truck, I had Total Chaos upper control arms in the front with an ADS 2.5-inch diameter coilover shock, 2.5-inch ADS shocks in the back with Deaver bolt-in leaf springs. Now that setup worked very well for the money. My only regret was that the Deavers were a little soft. Sometimes I tow with this truck, and I've towed with my last Tundra too, and they just sacked out. The springs got flat really quick. On this truck, we actually upgraded to heavy duty spring under Deavers, and it's running a cantilever suspension in the rear where the shocks are under the bed. That setup was a lot more intricate. It was more involved to install. It costs more. This truck does net 18 inches of wheel travel in the back. It has King 3-inch 3-tube bypass shocks. So the rear suspension on this truck can soak up just about anything you can throw at it, but it was expensive and complex. If I had it to do over again, I would run Archive Garage springs. They also make a shock kit that allows you to run pretty much any 12-inch travel shock. I feel like that's a better bang for the buck. Archive Garage makes some really cool products for these trucks, so if you own a first-gen Tundra, you definitely want to check them out. Now, the front suspension on this truck still uses Total Chaos upper control arms like my last truck. It has a 2.5-inch diameter King coilover in the front, but I'm running a bypass shock in addition to the coilover in the front. All of the parts are from Total Chaos to mount the bypass. I've got Total Chaos spindle gussets, I've got Total Chaos control arms, I've got Total Chaos coilover gussets, and the front end is super bomb proof. Now, the bad part about that bypass shock is that it gets rid of the sway bar because the packaging, the sway bar takes up the same space as the bypass shock does. And that's a bit of a compromise. We had to run a higher spring rate in the front so that we didn't get a lot of pitch and roll without the sway bar. Now, the other upside of running a higher spring rate in the front, and when I say higher, this has 850 pound-per-inch springs on the front. It's quite a bit stiffer than the rear, but I only have half as much wheel travel in the front as I do in the rear. So what this does is when I'm off-road in the rough, it allows the front end to pop over things and the rear just soaks it up. And the way you're able to get more wheel travel out of this is you run a uniball upper like this Total Chaos control arm here. So that uniball has a wider range of motion than the factory tie rod end does. So what that does is allow you to lift the truck up, but you still maintain down travel because that arm can travel further without binding. In my case, I also modified the CVs on this truck and used a Porsche CV boot instead of the factory boot, removing the sheet metal ring on the inside. That allowed for a wider angle of motion from the CV and allowed me to modify the shock to match and get another inch of down travel. So I wanted as much travel as I could get out of the front of this without going wider. You might ask, why did I change the control arms, add bypass shocks, and not just do a long travel kit? And it's a fair question. One of the things I like so much about these trucks are the dimensions. So this is not a very big truck. It's not super wide. I didn't want to add fiberglass fenders. I didn't want to make it any wider. I like that it fits in parking spots. I like that it fits down narrow trails, and I wanted to maintain that. So I wanted to get the best suspension as I could without adding width, and I think I accomplished it. It wasn't particularly easy, it wasn't particularly cheap, and there are diminishing returns with how much you spend and the suspension performance, but the effort was worth it. It works out pretty well, but honestly, bang for the buck, I think a 2.5-inch diameter shock front and rear with a Total Chaos upper control arm and a good leaf spring in the back is the best bang for the buck you can get. Do a jump! So I really like sleepers. We've got the factory bumper here, and actually Nate's Precision mounted a 40-inch Baja Designs Onyx 6 light bar behind the grill opening, or the bumper opening rather. I really like this look. 50-inch light bars on everything. It's dumb to put a $1,000 light bar behind your bumper opening. You could use any cheap light bar. The light output is diminished because it's behind the bumper. That's probably a place I would save money in the future, or if I had to do this over again. I've got amber fog lights. Those are all the rage, right? My only complaint there is that the marker lights are orange and these are yellow, but that's a pretty minor complaint. This is mounted on a foot switch. We talked about that in the video we made about all the different lighting options I have on my vehicles, and that's my favorite. I actually have switched the Ram over to a foot switch as well. That way you can keep your hands on the wheel and you can turn the light bar on and off without having to move your hands at all. Another lighting upgrade I made is this third brake light replacement from Evil Manufacturing that adds rear dust lights. So this actually, I'm using two Baja Designs S2 lights in there. These are the S2 Pros. If I had to do it again, they're almost too bright. I would just use normal S2s, save some money. They've got the fluted lenses so it diffuses the light, and they're really useful out on the trail if you're running with a group of people, particularly if you're running at speed. Now this also has their optional radio antenna on there. So I now have a hardwired line going into the cab. That's a really valuable upgrade. They make things for Raptors and other aluminum bodied trucks where you can't just put a magnetic mount on the roof. Not the case with this truck, but it's still a more elegant solution. More work to install for sure compared to just putting a magnetic mount on the roof, but I really like running my race radio with this when I'm out chasing. On this truck in the summer, I run a 35 by 11.5 Nitto Trail Grappler mud terrain tire on factory Toyota FJ Cruiser wheels. That's a load range C tire. I think it's a great choice for Toyotas, for Jeeps, for Ford Broncos that don't really need a load range E tire. Now in the winter, I'm running Nitto's new Terra Grappler G3 tire. This is a 3-peak mountain snowflake rated tire, great for ice and snow that we get around Tahoe. And it's an all-terrain, quiet, really good for a daily driver. Those are mounted on these 18-inch Black Rhino Chase wheels. Now, I throw a lot of shade at Black Rhino. I don't really care for the wheels that have all the bolts on them and have the military look when you're putting them on something like a Toyota. But these wheels, I think, are a super clean design. They also only weigh 26 pounds a piece. Unsprung weight is really important when you're going off-road, particularly when you're going fast. So weight is something you should look at when shopping for tires, and particularly for wheels. Now note that both trucks do have custom rock sliders my friend Dylan built. I really like these. He takes 2x2 box tubing and he turns it up on end at a 45-degree angle, so it's kind of like a mini boat side. They're super clean. They don't stick out real far, so if you're rock crawling and you lean into things, these aren't the best choice. But just for my use, where I might occasionally encounter a rock if I'm in a wash or I'm in the desert, they're gonna protect the truck and the rockers, but not get in the way where my pants get dirty every time I get in and out. On my access cab, I had a steel front skid plate from Relentless Fabrication, but unfortunately they don't make those anymore. Aftermarket support for a Tundra isn't nearly as much as it is for a Tacoma, but I was able to find these aluminum skid plates from RA Motorsports out of Canada. Now, they were expensive. I got them during COVID, so they took a long time to get. And honestly, the fitment wasn't great. I had to do some grinding because I had interference issues with the transfer case, but they are lightweight and they do provide a lot of protection underneath the vehicle. I don't know if you need to protect something you use in the desert all the way back. It's not a rock crawler. I think a front skid plate is plenty adequate. So if I had it to do over again, I would just add a front skid plate and call it good. Now the drivetrain, both trucks, my last access cab and this truck, used the 2UZ engine. This one from 2004 to 2006, they had VVTi, so variable valve timing. They also used a 5-speed transmission instead of a 4-speed. Overdrive is the same, first gear is the same, the gear splits are smaller. Now on paper, I thought these were gonna be a big improvement. I was really gonna like the 40 additional horsepower and the extra gear. I'll be honest with you, I don't really notice the difference. I've heard the non-VVTi engines are more reliable, although I have well over 100,000 miles on both engines without issue. The extra gear in the transmission I don't really notice, and with that variable valve timing, it's really only at the higher RPMs that you notice that additional horsepower. So if you're looking for one of these trucks, don't feel like you need to hold out to get the VVTi engine, in my opinion. The last truck had 33s on it. I was running 410 gears with an open differential in the front. Again, I use this truck in the desert. I use it as a daily driver, but I didn't want an open diff in the back. So I was running a helical limited slip, gear-driven limited slip from Powertrax called their Grip Pro. I ran that in my last truck and I ran it in this truck as well, and I think they work great. You don't have a bunch of wires, they're not super expensive, you don't need to run air to them or anything else, and they work great. This truck has 35-inch tires versus the 33s on the old truck, so I went with a 456 gear, and I feel like it's really well matched to it. I wanted a little taller tire because it is a longer truck and I wanted to maintain breakover angle. In order to fit those, I had to do some trimming in addition to the suspension modifications, and I'm also running a 1-inch body lift to just get a little more clearance in the front and rear. That's it for this video. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about Toyota Tundras, along with what modifications are the best bang for the buck. Not only in this platform, but really for any off-road vehicle that also doubles as a daily driver. I've got a lot of money wrapped up in the Tundra, and I like it, but I don't necessarily love it. Do you think I should keep it or move on to a new platform? Comment below and let me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Man, that is one sweet ride! Thank you for watching this Hairy Situations video on the Driving Line channel. Driving Line has all sorts of great content creators, and they're dropping new content almost daily. You're definitely going to want to subscribe so you don't miss any of it in the future. And we'll see you out on the trail. Man, that is one sweet ride!